All right. This session is being recorded now, guys. Just letting you know. Yeah, so welcome. Hey, guys. Welcome to the GenAI in FinTech meetups. This is the fifth virtual event tonight. As you guys know, we run this every fortnightly. At least I'm trying to. This is what I'm trying to do. This is our fifth one. We've been having a lot of really good engagement so far. Hopefully, we can keep this going. 2 seconds. I'm gonna add people in again. Right. Yeah, so before we kick off, I would like to start with the acknowledgement of country. I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we are meeting here today. I pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging, and also extend that respect to other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today. My name is Kurt Young. For some of you guys been attending our previous meetup sessions, I'm the founder of this Gen AI in FinTech meetup and also your host for this evening. I'm a digital banking product manager at a company called Sandstone Technology, which is the white labeled digital banking SaaS technology provider to about 30 banks or financial institutions globally. Personally, I'm super passionate about two things. One is lean product management. The other one is Gen AI technologies application in fintech. Hence why I created this meetup about 2 months ago. I also provide a bit of a ad hoc lean product management consulting services to startups and product coaching to individuals. So for those of you guys that are interested in knowing more about me or my service, please feel free to check out my own website at kurtyoung.com. Just a bit of a housekeeping stuff before we kick it off. First of all, please make sure if you have any questions, raise in the chat. While we are having our guest speaker do the presentation demo, I will try not to disrupt the flow too much. So we'll have plenty time for questions later on once you finish those presentation demo. Also, please mute yourself while either me or our guest speaker is presenting. And lastly, the session, as you know, is being recorded. So if you do have any issues, unfortunately, you have to you have to leave if that's the case. Without much further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce you our guest speaker for tonight, George Alifarakis. I hope I pronounced your
You
last
did
name
well.
right, George. Thank you. Appreciate that. George is a seasoned technology professional with over 25 years of experience in software development, project management, as well as technology leadership. So throughout his career, he had held numerous positions across a wide range of industries, including finance, SaaS, and fintech. George is currently the solution architect for Workato Embedded in our APAC region. For those of you who are not familiar with the company Workato, Workato is a world-leading integration and automation platform designed to connect various applications and automate business workflows without the need of extensive coding. So for some of you guys know Zapier, just think Workato is just I guess to some extent a bit similar to Zapier in a lot of services, but probably more at a bigger scale, for, more enterprise grade. I hope I kind of put a right comparison between the
That's a good
two. Maybe
overview.
I'll
Yep.
let George to elaborate a bit more on that. Yeah, so that's all from me, George. Please feel free to take it away. Yeah.
Thanks very much, Kurt. And thanks very much to the group that's joined us tonight. We're certainly very pleased to be presenting to you on these topics. The title for tonight's meetup is Harnessing Automation Tech and Gen AI. And we're putting that in a very practical light in terms of how it can help you with business processes. So, as Kurt mentioned, my name is George Alifirakis. I'm a solution architect in Workato Embedded in the region. And Workato has a couple of different product lines. I hope through the session tonight, you'll get to see the difference between a couple of our major product lines. I hope that becomes clear as we're going through some of the detail. So tonight's agenda, I'll give a bit of an overview of what is Workato. So whilst I do want to really get stuck into showing you a demo and showing you how things can work on the platform, I do need to spend a few minutes just to give you some context about our company and what our product line is, because it'll make a lot more sense for the rest of the presentation. Then the second item is some high-level points around applying Gen AI and automation tech to the work that you're doing and the industries that you're in. We will also be giving a live demo and crossing our fingers that the demo gods are kind tonight. So we'll be seeing the Workato platform in action, which is a concept that we have, which is called recipes. We'll see 2 recipes in action that are actually implementing a business flow. And I might get Kurt to mention this as well. Kurt will be keeping an eye out for which of you are asking really good questions. So please pay attention, think up some good questions to ask at the end, and we'll be giving out some prizes. So let's get into it a bit further. Let's talk about Workato. So Workato is an enterprise-grade integration and automation platform. A little bit of background about our founders. So they came from companies like Tibco and Oracle, where integration was founded and became really important. And over the years, they kind of thought that it could be done a lot better. And their main sort of principles about starting Workato was to offer all of the power and functionality of enterprise-grade integration platforms, but to use their terminology, they wanted to democratize it and to make it available into parts of the business outside of IT, outside of developers. So you can include, departments like finance and HR and other disciplines within the business into this very technical space. So their aim was really to give it a very nice UI, easy to use, and you'll see some of that tonight, but to have all of the power and the features that really this slide encapsulates. So the automation capabilities is Workato's recipes. Those are the workflows. That's what's actually containing the business logic that runs. And to kick it off, it's listening to essentially a range of events. Sorry, let me go back. So in terms of events, the platform has the ability to look for changes in external platforms. So think of that in terms of webhooks, but we also have the ability to go polling and looking for data. And when we have an event that is received, we fire off a recipe that contains the workflow. We also have the ability to use bots, and bots come in a couple of different flavors in terms of Slack and Teams bots. And we have been recently incorporating AI and ML into our platform, as many large tech vendors, as you know, have been doing. And that'll be the focus tonight. So some of the functionality that's kind of backing up the workflow automation, the platform has the ability to bring data to get together centrally from a number of different sources. That's the data hub concept by doing ETL and ELT. But certainly one of the most powerful features is our library of connectors. So Workato has a huge amount of engineering effort that's gone into a range of connectors. Again, we'll see some of those tonight. The purpose of the connectors is to encapsulate, let's say, an external party's API, and so that the person who's building the Workato recipe doesn't really need to have knowledge of the underlying workings of that API. They don't need to know how to authenticate to it. They don't care whether it's doing REST, JSON, or SOAP XML. So the purpose of the connector is to surface only the business functionality so that the person writing that logic can really concentrate there. And that's certainly one of the most powerful concepts about the platform, and you'll see some of that tonight as well. Of course, for more complex use cases, you can introduce code. So while it's a low or no code platform, it is possible if you need to do something a little bit more complex in a very efficient manner, you can introduce code into our logic as well. And then the other key concept that we want to convey is that Workato is a serverless platform, like many of the modern and very progressive cloud services. You generally don't need to worry about things like how much compute has been allocated, how many virtual machines, how much memory and CPU. We have a platform that takes a workload and auto scales to go and find the resources it needs to execute on that workload. And when we get into the demo and you see the recipes, all of that's going to become a little bit more clear. And I'll talk about it as well on the next slide. A little bit more about Workato architecture, and I'm guessing that we have in the audience and from what Kurt has told me, some technical folk. So I'll spend a few minutes here. This is one of my favorite slides in terms of Workato because it encapsulates a lot of the concepts in a single slide. So I'll start at the top left. We've got users, and these users are, imagine them to be your staff who are using platforms, but it could also be your customers. So if you're currently running a SaaS platform, imagine that your users are logged into your platform and they're doing things. They're transacting, they're looking at records, they're updating records. So then we go to the top right, and this is an indication of Workato's, a very small slice of our connector library. And our connector library, as part of a recipe, is sitting there and it's looking for these business events. So it could be that a transaction has just completed. In the case of DocuSign, maybe someone has just signed a document. In the case of Okta, maybe a new user has joined a group, or a new user has been created. And Workato's connectors are on the lookout for changes in these particular platforms. We can do that, as I mentioned before, using webhooks or polling. And then when one of these events is found, we kick off a recipe. And inside of that recipe is where the business logic lives. And it gets executed on a huge pool of containers that we manage, which is represented at the bottom here. Supporting that functionality is a set of sort of non-functional requirements. So it's highly secure, highly reliable. There's role-based access control across the platform. So whether it's your users or one of your customers' users as well, we can give them a particular role that governs the permissions that they have in the Workato platform and what they can see and do there. So just wanted to give that snapshot view of the Workato platform. Next, I wanted to talk briefly about the two different sort of major product lines that we have, and I don't want to spend any time on a sales pitch here, but it's just really to put into context what I'm showing you tonight. So companies can use the Workato platform internally to enhance their own internal business processes. I mentioned finance and HR as a couple of examples, but it is also possible to take our functionality and actually embed it into your portal. So if you've got a product, you can significantly enhance the connectivity of your platform and the features by embedding Workato inside of your platform, and there's a way to do that. So just wanted to briefly cover off on that point. Okay, let's get on to a bit of the topic tonight about how we would incorporate Gen AI in a business process. And the way that we're showing you tonight is certainly not the only way, but we think it's a really good way because it can be slipstreamed into existing processes that you have on the platforms that you're running. We're going to do that through the lens of a particular example. And this is a fictitious flow, but it's one that you might encounter often. But it's just a demo flow to look at this concept. So let's describe the problem. We have an accounts payable team inside of an enterprise that is regularly receiving through a random email box a bunch of invoices and purchase orders and quotes and things of that nature, just randomly coming into the organization, and someone has to sit there manually receiving them, interpreting them and categorizing them, and then matching them to an original purchase order that they may have raised at some time in the past. So imagine the company has raised a purchase order in their ERP or / accounting platform, then that vendor has provided a product or service to them and sent an invoice. And that invoice just comes in randomly, and they need to deal with it somehow. So the flow that we're showing is invoices are coming in to a random Outlook email inbox at accounts payable department. It's going to have an attachment on it, which is these days typically going to be a PDF. And the recipe is going to pick that up, and we're going to use a large language model, in this case, OpenAI, ChatGPT, and we're going to use that AI to determine if we have an invoice. And we're going to pass some information like the email subject, the email body, and then some information about the attachments. And we're going to get the AI to work out, is this an invoice or is this some other random email that's come into the inbox? If the AI determines and says to us, yes, this looks like an invoice to me, then we're going to parse that document. And we're going to do it using a service called Amazon Textract. And we at Workato think that it's really important to realize that even though there's been this explosive growth in the past, sort of 12 to 18 months in large language models, let's not forget from an IT perspective, we've been doing AI and ML for some time. And there are some models that have been very highly trained with millions of documents to do things like recognition. So what we're showing tonight is, let's use the LLMs for what they're good at, but let's not forget the massive investment that IT has put in to some really, let's call them narrowband AI, with things like recognizing financial documents. So we're showing that tonight. We're going to send a document into Amazon Textract to do the actual recognition of the fields in an invoice. And then when we get that data back, we're going to try to match it to a purchase order in MYOB Advanced. Now, for those that may not know, MYOB has a couple of main business lines. The most popular one that people know about is their accounting package, which is MYOB Business, but they also have another line called MYOB Advanced, and that's an ERP platform. So we're going to take the purchase order number that we have extracted from that document, and we're going to attempt to match it to a purchase order that was originally created in MYOB Advanced. And then what we're going to do is we're going to add some notes into that PO and upload the invoice file that came in from the email, because we will have determined that it's an invoice and we will have matched it to a PO. So with confidence, we will then attach it onto that record. So let's get into a bit more detail about and summarize this slide. We're going to determine if an incoming email is an invoice. We're going to parse some key fields out that you might expect, like a PO number, and an invoice number, total value, and we'll even get the line items out. We're going to match to a PO in the ERP platform and upload detailed notes. And the other thing that's not mentioned here is we're also going to send an email back into that inbox to let the person know that we're handling it through the automated system, so that they don't go manually processing it as well. The business benefit of doing this is that we have a faster and more accurate process for handling the incoming invoices, and there's less work in the accounts payable department, so that those people can work on higher value tasks. It's worth mentioning as well that this particular solution is meant to give you inspiration. So you could imagine this being used, these concepts being used in many different ways and in many different business processes. We're using this one as an example. Let me skip that slide for a moment. And now I'm going to go into demo. And the first thing I'll do with the demo is I'll show you in these other browser tabs the various platforms that we're working with tonight. And I'm going to start with the first one where it all sort of begins, which is that someone has raised a purchase order in MYOB Advanced. So this is a test account that has been provided to us by MYOB. We're working with them on a project at the moment, and there's a purchase order that's sitting here to a supplier called Bondi Food. And if I click into that, I can see some detail about it. There's going to be an amount there. In this case, it's $52.38. It's going to have some line items. So this is something that I will be expecting the vendor to send me an invoice for at some point. So how will we receive that invoice? So we have a Microsoft Outlook email account here. Again, it's a test account, and this is going to represent the accounts payable department receiving an email. Now we've got a Gmail account, and I realize there's a few moving parts here. So the Gmail account is going to be the vendor who's supplying the meals, and they're the ones that are going to be sending an invoice. And this is what it looks like. It's a bit rough, right? It's got information all over the place. It's got an address. It's got those two line items adding up to a total of 52.38. There's a PO number here. And those are some of the details that we'll want to see being extracted out. Finally, what ties this all together is the Workato platform. So in this tab here, we've got, in these two tabs, we've got recipe 1 and recipe 2. So recipe 1, I spoke to you before about connectors and triggers and that they're looking for certain business events. Here's an example of that. So I'll spend some time here on the two major components of a Workato recipe. At the top is the trigger. This is the condition that we're looking for, and nothing's going to happen until this condition is met. And you can see here it's described in plain English. It says, a new email is received in Outlook Mail, and it's got a condition on it. We're only going to process those where it has an attachment. And you could continue to chain conditions there to say if the attachment ends in .pdf and so on and so forth. When the trigger condition is met, and you'll see that in a few moments, it happens very quickly, we will kick off a job, and that sits in our job log a bit like a transaction. And that job's purpose is to run the actions inside of the recipe. So this is where the workflow logic lives. And what's it going to do? It's going to download the email attachments. It's going to send off a message to ChatGPT, and I'll show you the detail of what that looks like. And then if the best answer from the LLM is that it's not an invoice, then we're going to stop and do nothing further. But if it is an invoice, then we're going to do some more steps. For each of the attachments in the email, so see now that we can introduce control logic into the recipe. For each of the attachments, we're going to loop over those. And for each of those, if they are a content type of PDF, we're going to upload them into an S3 bucket. We're going to invoke a function in AWS Lambda, which is that Amazon Textract service I spoke about. So Workato has a connector into AWS Lambda that really opens up the world of AWS. Even though we have connectors into specific AWS services as well, like S3 in this case, we can invoke a Lambda. So then we add an entry into a lookup table, and that allows us to keep track of our business processing, because we have a secondary recipe that we run later, and we want to keep track of where we are with our processing, so we can store some information on the platform. And then we send an email back to that Outlook inbox to say, hey, we're working on this. The automation has taken over and is processing this invoice. So that's what recipe number 1 is going to do. Before I run it, I'm going to give you a quick preview of recipe number 2. So why do we have 2 here? Because the Amazon Textract service is asynchronous. We posted a document, then it processes, and we don't know when it's going to come back to us. It usually comes back in a few seconds from my experience, but it may take longer. So we have recipe number 2, And this is again Workato keeping an eye out for a business event, but this time it's quite different. It's looking for a new file in Amazon S3 in a particular folder. And these are the output files from Amazon Textract. We know that they're going to land in a particular place. And when they land there, we're going to use some of the utility functions on the Workato platform to process that output. So we're going to parse the document that's come back. We are looking, as I mentioned, for specific financial fields. We want the PO number, the total amount, and the invoice number, because we want to write those as notes back into MYB Advanced. We're going to get a purchase order. So here's where we do the check, and we see, does the PO number in the invoice that we've gotten match to an existing PO in MYB Advanced? And then, if that's the case, we're going to download the PDF content. We're going to attach it to the PO in Advanced, and then we're going to add our note to that as well. So now I'm going to show you a bit of information about how this all hangs together. I'm going to stop that recipe briefly, and I'm going to focus on the ChatGPT step. I've noticed some good questions coming through, and I promise we'll get to those as well. I just want to show you here how we go about doing this. So what we have seen with LLMs is that they're really only as good as the instructions that you give them. I'm sure you guys have seen it as well as you're interacting with Google Gemini, with ChatGPT. If you provide them a really good, what we call doing prompt engineering, then that really increases the quality of the result that they give back to you, and it sets the context for how they should respond. So we're telling ChatGPT what its objective is, which is to determine whether an email has been received, is likely to be an invoice, and you can see here that we're giving it instructions. And we're also telling it, please reply back with either this is an invoice or it's not an invoice, and we're being very specific about that text. We are also telling it how we're going to be providing it the content. So we're saying you will receive the email content in this field. This is how you'll receive the subject, and this is how you'll receive the names of the attachments that were on the email. And what are these sections here? Well, this is how Workato does its mapping. So as you can see here, we've taken the content from step 1, which is the email content. We've taken the subject, and we've taken attachment names. So if I was to click into this here and I was doing it for the first time, this step has access to all of the outputs of the previous steps that have run, including the trigger. So I can scroll through this list, and I can pick off the field that I want to drop into the target, and I can just click on that and drop that in. That's how mapping is done. That's how Workato recipes are built. Okay, so a little bit of insight there into how we are basically giving ChatGPT some training on how it should respond to us. Now I'm going to start the recipe and do this demo, and fingers crossed, as I mentioned before. I'm going to now send, and I want to show you first over in Advanced before I do this, that we don't have any notes attached at the moment. So notes is blank and files are blank. And I'm just going to go back to that main list. And I'm going to now be the vendor, and I'm going to forward my invoice again in a new email. I'm going to say, please find attached the latest invoice for meal supply, and you can see that PDF is attached. So I'm just going to send that now. And then we have someone in accounts department who is monitoring the inbox. And now we're waiting on Google Mail to send to Outlook Mail online. And that's arrived. That's the trigger for Workato. And remember, we're watching for these events live. So if I now go over to jobs, I've found one job. I've got one, that's there, sitting there. what Workato does now is it creates a transaction if you like. And I tested this earlier tonight. I wanted to make sure everything was working, but here's that new one that's just turned up at 7:32. So we have created a job. Workato has spun up a container. It's put the recipe logic into that container, and it's done that run of all of those steps. If I click into this now, I can see that recipe again, but this time I'm looking at the individual job. And what I get to see here is all of, so Kurt, your question, does it still work if the PDF is scanned? Yes,
Uh,
it should do a pretty good job of images as well as PDFs, I believe. Let's look now though at what I can see in the recipe job view is I can click on each of the steps and I can see the inputs and outputs. So this is now through the Workato Outlook connector. It's giving me detail about this email that's come in, all of the fields. Let's focus on the Chat GPT step. So this is the input that we gave it. We fed it this message, including our prompt engineering, by the way. So all of that text around your objective is to do this and so on and so forth, including the email body and the email subject and the names of the attachments as well. Now, what did ChatGPT tell us back? That's in the output tab. So if I just expand on that, well, you can see here in summary, its best choice answer was that it's an invoice. So it correctly determined that that document was an invoice. That's the answer that we were looking for. We've then gone on to do the rest of these steps. So for each of the attachments, of which there was only one in this case, we uploaded to Amazon S3, and you can see that each of these platforms gives us a slightly different, flavor of response. That just depends on what their API is passing back to us, right? We then sent an email back to the inbox to say that we're working on it, and that should have arrived here. So this one says, please be notified that we are processing this below email through the automated invoicing matching feature. So this is really to give notification back to where we had gotten it from originally to let this person know that the automated system is working on it. That was our last step there. But as I mentioned before, we pushed this document up to Textract and we had it parsed. And so now recipe number 2, I expect from some time ago, has now also done its job. And let's take a look. So there's that new job at 7:33. I think it was maybe a minute or two after the first one. This is the output now. So this is now Amazon Textract having parsed the document. And what this brings back is actually like a really long and complex document. And I don't want to click through the whole thing, but it's got many lines. So Amazon Textract does a very comprehensive analysis of all of the fields, and it even gives a confidence rating. So if we have a look at some of the top level data, it's come back with an expense document. I can click through and look at the individual blocks that it parsed. I'm only really interested in these summary fields. And you can go through those one by one, as we can see here. And I think at some point it gives a confidence. So you can see here it's picked out some of the address. And if I go through these, I'm going to be finding the purchase order number in there, the invoice number, amounts, and things like that. And it gives a confidence rating. So it's saying it's got a 99.99% confidence that it found the word Brisbane as part of the address. Now, where would I use the confidence? From a business perspective, I might have logic inside of the Workato recipe that says, hey, if this doesn't have a confidence over 95%, I'm going to discard it or throw an error or throw an alert to say, I can't process this document because I don't have that confidence rating, right? So this is what I mean about some narrowband AI that's been out there for some time, where Amazon has put a massive amount of engineering effort and trained their service on millions of documents, and they're giving back some pretty advanced features here. So these kinds of things are still worth considering as part of an AI solution. So our final steps, we looked for a purchase order over in MYB Advanced. I'm sure we found one because I had it there ready to go, right? And then we downloaded the PDF and we would have done that attach. So I'll show you that final result before we go over to some questions. If I do a refresh of the page now, we're looking for 0001. You see now that we've got a yellow icon there. So that shows us that something has been attached onto that record. We've got a file. So I can click on that file, open that up, and there's the PDF. This puts the information back where the person in accounts payable is most likely to use it as part of their day-to-day. So even this part of their process of, imagine if they received the manual email, having to download and save it somewhere, and then go into advanced, upload it again, even that has saved them some time. And then, this is the bit that I like a lot, is in the notes section, we've taken a lot of that detail that's been parsed out of the invoice and we've attached it into here to help the person out. So we've got the invoice total, invoice number. This gives them the information that they need to pay this. And how have we assembled that text? So I'll show you that last step in that recipe, which was adding the note. And I want to do that in the editing mode because it'll be a lot clearer. So we used a particular method here, which is to put onto the purchase order endpoint of MyOb Advanced. And this is how we've assembled that text. We've basically taken a combination of the outputs of different steps inside of the recipe, the date that the job was created on the Workato platform, the PO number, the file name, email sender, and so on and so forth. This is really up to business requirements as to what you would include here. And we've done that on the unique ID of that PO number. That's how we got that data into Advanced. And this is really where the founders of Workato had this dream around, I don't have any knowledge of the underlying implementation detail of this platform, but you could very much see how a non-technical business person could come in and change these mappings and change these values. And that's our end result there. So that's the demo part. I will spend a couple of minutes on just some key pointers around how you could include Gen AI in a business process, some high-level points. So our recommendation at the moment is to tackle one piece at a time. You saw from a few slides back, we've got this whole process around invoice receiving and parsing and matching. Some of that may still be manual. So we're saying tackle the piece that you're likely to be successful with in the short term and that the AI can help with. You don't have to revamp the whole thing in one go. The other thing which we think is still very important is what we call human in the loop design. So you noticed we didn't pay the invoice because it's certainly possible to do that. In MYOB Advanced, we could have instructed the platform to go and pay it. But because AI does still make mistakes and it can get it wrong, we're saying design it so there's still a human in the loop. Make it as easy as possible for a human to make the final decision on that transaction. And the way that we achieved that was to put the notes in there, upload the PDF, and then we could even send them a note in Slack to say, hey, we've just done this. Go and please look at it and pay it. So we're including a human in the loop. Then, so some question around, sort of AI is evolving very very quickly. So we think a really good solution is to use a platform like Workato, which is quite modular. I could change the recipe very easily to swap out steps, use a different model, and we might see that as an example here. I don't have to use ChatGPT. I could use as an example Gemini, right? And achieve a similar thing. Then, as ChatGPT or as OpenAI continues to evolve their models, I can change model. So inside of here, inside of the settings, I can give this command to the new version, which is GPT 4.0, as an example. How will be doing this? So Workato is reaching out to ChatGPT's uh, schema endpoints, where they basically publish their services and their models. So we collect that information and offer it in our connector. That means anytime they release a new model, we don't have to do like a discrete engineering effort to go and pick that up. We allow the choice of the model, and then based on your choice of model, then we will also change the available fields if a model has different inputs that it accepts or expects. So we're saying in your solution, make it modular so that you could potentially swap these things out. And then have good discipline around the test cases. So you should have a good testing suite, which as many of you know, as programmers, good unit testing, so that you can swap pieces out, run your unit tests, and make sure that it still gets the result that you are expecting. And then we think it's really important as you're designing these kinds of solutions that you track and have simulation metrics. So what we mean by that is have part of the process record what would the AI have done if you'd let it do it, and then that lets you build confidence over time. So in our particular case tonight, let's take a record of we got this match. If we had actually paid the invoice, would the AI have got it right? Uh, and then just leave the human in the loop until you process a couple hundred, and then that lets you build confidence over time around letting the AI take it all the way through to a final transaction, and record those metrics so that you can look back and say, if I had let it do the full job, would it have been successful in 99% of cases? That's most of the presentation, Kurt. I think I had some other things to work through, but I think maybe we'll open it to questions because we've gone for some time there.
Yeah, good timing. I just want to say thank you first because, I mean, for one, because I work in enterprise, I do feel like this is super relevant, especially in the enterprise context, right? Because I think a lot of people talk about Gen AI or ChatGPT, but in the real world, especially in the enterprise context, the Gen AI technology doesn't work alone. You have to really make that connect well with the rest of the existing, whether you can call legacy tech or other sort of tech that popularly being used in enterprise in order to deliver a outcome. Because like what a business cares about is the final outcome. Like does that improving the business metrics? So I think this is actually why I feel like really really resonated well with. So thank you for the awesome presentation. We got a couple of questions in the chat. The first couple of it's from Adiba. I think I hope I pronounced your name right. The first one is just asking about the MyOb thing, right? Like, I think the solution you mentioned earlier, the integration with MyOb, does that, apart from that that MyOb integration, do you guys also maybe integrate with other accounting software? You just
Yep. We definitely do. We have connections into platforms like Xero, other ERPs, sort of enterprise grade ones like SAP, Oracle. So there's definitely a suite there. Workato publishes a connectors page, and you can go and look at that and see what other platforms that we support. In addition to our accounting connectors, though, we also have a few generic connectors. So you could just call a HTTP endpoint directly using our HTTP connector, and some other options like that. So there's a reasonable amount of I guess diversity in our connectors. Yep.
Amazing. The second question is also from Adiba. Because he's saying because it's sending those information are being sent to ChatGPT or OpenAI, are there any security concerns? It's actually the similar questions I was having in mind as well. Just that kind of a data security side of the yeah
Yeah,
considerations.
that's a really great question that everyone is concerned about. So what we are aware of is that the large AI vendors can offer you, probably on their enterprise grade plans, they boost up the sort of security and privacy, and according to their terms, using their services under that subscription plan, they don't keep the data. So they will keep the data for so long as the transaction applies, and then they are meant to discard it after that point. Uh, on some of the free plans, I think they're letting you use the service for free, but I think the downside is that they say that they are collecting some metrics. They're not necessarily collecting the content, but they're collecting some metadata about the types of questions and the types of responses, because this helps them train their models a bit better into the future. But certainly, as far as we're aware, on the enterprise plans, the privacy is meant to be respected. Yeah.
Nice. The next question is from Charmaine. I think she's actually one of our upcoming guest speakers as well. So very exciting to see she's here. Charmaine's asking, curious to know how those large language model actions has been received by customers. For example, were they excited to jump into using the large language model in that recipe was receipts? Did they have any specific concerns, or did they struggle with any upcoming or coming up with the prompts? So yeah, just a bit more insights around the customer side.
I think Charmaine has touched on a couple of key points there. So yes, they're very excited. Um, it is being used. They have also asked Workato about what we're doing to introduce these features directly on the platform, which we are, by the way. Um, so it's going to be AI on the platform, but backed underneath by large language models from the big vendors like OpenAI, who've made massive investments. But I think you touched on a really good point there about the prompts. The prompts are quite critical to the success of the output. So there's definitely a bit of experimentation there. That's where I would consider the development to be, right? Is on that prompt engineering and getting that right. And it's a bit of trial and error. So to give you an example, I have given a similar presentation. I actually gave that same demo at an MYB conference to a bunch of their partners, and I had to run it about 30 or 40 times because I wanted to be confident. The very first time it didn't work for me was when I was on stage presenting it. Right, it gave a wrong answer, and then after that I had to go back and fine tune the prompt so that it was a bit more confidently giving the right answer back. So I think that's where that's where we're seeing customers spend a fair bit of their time. But if you get that right, then it does significantly increase the chance of getting a positive response.
Good one. All right. Last question I got in the chat. How does an organization, this one's from Ali, how does an organization implementing this integration protect proprietary company data from being exposed? I think this is a bit similar to the previous question, right? More from
Yeah.
integration perspective. Yeah.
I'm gonna jump back and show you a couple of platform features. So if there's a particular step inside of here, so this is from Workato's perspective. We are obviously in our connectors using a bunch of other services. So we're getting stuff from Outlook. We're passing information up to AWS. All of the touch points along the way, you need to check what all of these vendors are doing, right? But I'm just going to talk about Workato's perspective. So you can, on any given action here, if my screen is still being shared, mask data. Mask
Mm,
data for us means under no circumstances are we going to store any of the data that's passed into or out of that step, regardless of the data retention policy and that job view screen that I showed you. And we can also set on the job view, we can set a time frame. So we can not store this at all, but this is super useful from a monitoring and troubleshooting perspective. So some of our customers say they're happy to retain this for say as an example, 7 days. 7 days gives enough time for support people to troubleshoot if there's something not quite right there, and then we will automatically remove the data after that time frame, and that's an acceptable risk for most of our customers because they know that we are going to get rid of it, but that we have a short window that's there for troubleshooting purposes. Now, the very strict ones in terms of their policy, they may turn the setting on that says don't store that at all. Um, the downside of that is that you can't do the monitoring and troubleshooting, but then you know that there's no data being retained whatsoever. So those are options.
awesome. Um, I don't see any more questions in the chat. I actually do have just a couple of burning questions from my side. I'll just quickly ask. One is, what were some of the key challenges your development teams faced when developing and also perhaps going to market with those Gen AI solutions that being integrated into the overall Workato solution? Yeah.
Yep. So from a product development perspective,
Mm,
touched on briefly, but I'm going to see if I had addressed this in some of our um, in some of our content here. So for us, deployment at scale becomes a challenge because
mm,
we are going to we release a feature and we've got many thousands of customers who start picking it up straight away. And as soon as we push it, we know it's gonna get usage. So a lot of engineering effort has been put into how our platform scales, but then also we need to have confidence that the third party service has the capacity too. So that's a conversation that we have with OpenAI around this is how much this is how much volume roughly we expect to send you, and then it becomes a service level agreement discussion. So we're signing up to the appropriate enterprise grade plan of theirs that's going to be able to handle that kind of traffic. Other challenge at the moment is that for these services, it's at present it's very US centric. So
mm.
they're still beefing up their capacity to serve their services out of other data centers outside of the US. But at the moment, it's quite central to there. So some of the AI features that are on the Workato platform are only available at the moment in our US data center. And that's going to change over time, but it means that for Australian customers who must have the data resident here, then they may decide that it's not quite time for them yet. So those are some of the challenges that are still there.
Got it.
And then I'm just going to touch on the last one. So when you are using the LLM, in many cases, you need it to be responsive to your particular business domain. You want it to have knowledge about your platform and your product line because it's got to be able to respond smartly and in context. Now, the way that you do that to get the best result is to fine tune the model. Now, that's quite a heavy lift. So that involves taking your business data and sending it to a vendor like OpenAI, and they've got tools to do this, but those tools are still evolving. So at the moment, it's a bit manual, and we've done this as well, where we've taken our data sets and the terminology around Workato, and we've fed it into OpenAI models to fine tune them. So it's a form of training, like a light training, so that the model is better equipped to handle questions about your particular platform and your data sets. if you can't do that, or it's too much of a lift, then the prompt engineering, of which we've seen an example tonight, is the next best way. But there's a limit then to how much data you can feed it. So every question you ask it, if you've got to give it tons of data for it to have the context, it's difficult to do that because the inputs have a particular limit. There are some models that can only accept a couple of kilobytes of data. That's starting to get better. But if you've got to give it a huge block of data so that it's got context about the questions that it might take, then that's one of the challenges that we're seeing as well.
Got it. I actually still have tons of other questions for you, but just given the interest of time, I think I'm gonna pause here because I do have, or we do have the very last sort of exciting thing, which is announcing the winners of the prizes, right? I think just given the engagements we see in the chat, I believe the gift voucher prize we talk about, we will give it to Adiba, Charmaine, and Ali. So thank you guys for your engagement, for your really, really intriguing questions. So for your email addresses, I actually have them in the meetup attendees list. So I will pass them on to George's Workato team. So they will be reaching out to you guys via email, probably sending like some sort of, I think it's like electronic gift voucher,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So they will be reaching out to you guys via email. Just look out your inbox in the coming days. So they should be coming very soon. Yeah, so on behalf of our meetup, George, and also our attendees, I think this has been a very, very comprehensive, very detailed, thorough presentation and demo. I think we all have learned a lot, especially for those of us working in a enterprise context, because I work in enterprise. So I do feel like whether it's just Workato's, that automation tech as well as Gen AI together, there's definitely a lot of room for opportunities to implement those solutions. So really appreciate your time for this evening.
Thanks, guys, for your attention tonight. It was great to present to you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. All right, have a good night, guys. I think our next event's in 2 weeks. I'll be publishing that. I think I might have published already. So just check out our event page, and we'll look forward to see you guys, next event in fortnight. Bye, guys.